right, y'all. Welcome to That's What I'm Saying, the podcast about hip hop, entertainment, dating, sex, relationships, and social issues from a sometimes ratchet but mostly woke perspective. So, today we actually have a show that is all the woke minute. And we have a special guest, Amadeuz Christ, who is the producer of Out of Darkness. So, if you have not seen this documentary film and he's going to talk about it, please, y'all, you have to watch it. You have to watch it. So I'm so excited. We are so excited to have him here. Yay! A little bit cutie applause. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Welcome.
Good.
Okay, so
Thank
before
you.
we get into
How's the weather
film,
where you're at? Let's start with the weather.
yeah. But before we get into the film Out of Darkness, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a film director. I own a media company called Building 7 Media. I got into film kind of by accident. I started off as a rapper and I just really wanted to shoot my own music videos. And because the music videos at that time were so expensive to do, I literally couldn't afford to shoot my own videos. And I went back to school to learn film. So when I went back to school to learn film, I got my BA in radio, television, film from San Jose State University. And one of the requirements was for me to do a radio class. So I did the radio class, and we just would start off like artists would come in like Kendrick Lamar, Dom Kennedy,
Wow.
the whole range of popular artists. We're talking about like 2010, 2011, 2012. So what we would do is we would contact the
Okay.
management companies and would say, hey, such and such are going to be here. We'll go and record your show, and we want to do an interview with you for the radio station. So that's just kind of how that segued for me being involved in hip hop, doing these pieces for stuff, and this stuff was landing on all the major blogs at the time, Hip Hop DX and Two Dope Boys and all of that stuff. So that segued for me to do music videos. So I actually, Locksmith is a good friend of mine. He's a major artist. He's on a lot of Sway in the Mornings and K Slay. He's from Richmond, Bay Area,
Okay.
like myself. Well, I'm from the Bay Area. I'm not from Richmond. I'm from San Francisco. But I actually had like music videos on MTV, Revolt TV. Shout out to Revolt TV. They just aired Out of Darkness about a few months ago. I don't know if you guys know that, but it was on Revolt
Okay.
TV. But I started doing music
Because I
videos,
was
and
going to say
then
something about Puff if it wasn't.
no, that's cool.
I was gonna say something about Pete Diddy
Yeah,
if it wasn't on Revolt, but okay, yeah, good.
no, they actually reached out to me. They were very cool. They were very cool. So
Okay,
so I got into music videos,
That's
and
good.
then I kind of got frustrated with the whole music industry ordeal. So that's when I started to uh, veer off and just do my own thing. I started my own business, and then I really just wanted to make something for us. I wanted to use my talents uh, to uplift our people, right? So what I would do is
yes,
once I started to get into African history and culture, I would post a lot of stuff on Facebook all the time about African history, stuff that would just blow people's mind. At first, a lot of people were trying to debate it, and then people would stop debating it. And I was like, And then my homie Dirk, Dirk Pate, shout out to Dirk Pate. He went to Berkeley School of Music. That's my homie from Oakland. He hit me up one day and he was like, yo, man, you should make a movie. You should make a film based on all of the stuff you be putting on Facebook. And I was like, yo, that's a good idea, bro. And I did it. So that's really how Out of Darkness came to be. But Out of Darkness originally, like, it was really the questions that I was having as I was waking up. You know what I mean?
right.
And I was just these were the questions that I was asking. So as I'm waking up, as I'm being introduced to people like Dr. Claude Anderson, Kaba Kamene, Professor James Small,
Yes.
Tony Browder, Dr. Joy DeGruy, Dr. John Henry Clark is like my spiritual intellectual godfather. Amos Wilson. These are all the people that I'm running into as I'm coming into this awareness, and I'm reading all these books, and I'm like, yo, I got to get these people in the film, right? So, I'm from the Bay Area, California, and luckily, fortunately for me, that a lot of these people were just happened to be coming to the Bay Area doing lectures and presentations. Renoko Rashidi,
Divine
he's not in the
timing.
first one, but he'll be in the next one. But I would just literally run up on these people and be like, "Yo, I'm a young filmmaker. I'm a college student. Doing a documentary on African culture. Give me 15 minutes," and they just like, "Okay, sit down." And they would just, but that's what the elders are supposed to do. They're supposed
Really?
to look out for the young people, and that's what it was. So it's just literally me sitting down with these people for the first time and just asking them questions that I had. You know what I mean? And I was able to get all of that in the film and edit it together. And I honestly didn't
Oh,
never think the film would come out, but it came out and it did very well, and it's still doing well.
it did. And you got all of them. You got like
Yeah,
all of these great people.
yeah,
And initially I'm like, these are like hidden figures. And
yeah.
and I say that because I'm like, we have our scholars, we have our doctors,
Hmm.
we have our historians. Like you have such a nice, well-rounded
Yeah,
group of people to tell these amazing
yeah,
stories. And I'm like, how did he pull all this together?
yeah,
Like this, why don't we know of these people? Like I'm
yeah,
out the dark. How did you how
yeah.
did you pull all that together?
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing is,
That was
these people have been around for a while. These people have been around since
Mm,
60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. If you look at the African centered movement
mhm,
in the 80s, Dr. Henry Clark and Kaba Kamene and Tony Browder and Dr. Ben, they were all making the circuits back in the 80s, and it was really popular back then. But what you had was a counter to that, where you had European ideologies come in and confuse us, right? So now when you go to school, you're learning
mhm.
Black feminist theory, and you're learning you're learning subculture violence
Right.
theory, and you're learning stuff that's completely antithetical to African history and culture. They don't even mention African history and culture. So you're getting this
Right.
indoctrination and this brainwashing in the education system, right? So that was a big part of the African centered movement, and they were fighting to get this stuff in the curriculum, right? And that you're swimming upstream with that, because the people who dominate you and oppress you will not teach you your culture and your history, because if you
Right.
look at the slave
Right.
revolts, in the Caribbean, the reason why you had so many slave revolts is because the slave plantation owners did not break up the families, right? Like they did in North America. So that
Mhm.
cultural continuity was still maintained. So when the
Front of the
people
yeah.
know who they are, it's very harder to dominate them and control them, right? So that's the reason why the information was
Right.
kept from you. It's
right.
specifically ancient Egypt and Kemet.
Yeah, and talking about how information
Hmm.
has been kept from us,
Hmm.
and that I was just like I said, I was so in awe of just the realization of how important your film was to us, to Black people. There's a line in the film where a young woman says that if there was 1,000-page book of African history, slavery would be on page 999. And that struck a chord with me because I had to go through how I learned in the school system, how I grew up. We learned everything about slavery. I could tell you all the 12 years of the slave. But when it came to Kemetic or African, or just even Egypt. Egypt wasn't in Africa. I never learned that. It wasn't. I asked my son now. He is 12, going on 13, and I want to know. What are they teaching? Because me growing up, they made Africa and Egypt. They were not the same, and there was a reason for that. There was a reason for keeping that separatism, and there was a reason for why. I learned about the bat. What do they call it? the unusual predicament or something, which was slavery. It was like code for
Hmm.
slavery. Um,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
your film was really important because it's, I think like for young people, this is where we need to start. And I mean, a film like this, of this stature and of this size, you can only do but so much. But it's so important. It's
Yeah.
like the tipping point. Like if you need an outline for where you need to start to get the real,
Yeah.
this is it.
Go back.
Yeah.
Go back to the incense burner
Yeah.
that showed that there was civilization.
Yeah.
Go back to the
Yeah, to the
incense
Swiper
burner. That's what I
stone. I'm
learned.
like,
I'm
we
like,
never learned about
yeah,
that.
like, yeah, go way back.
Our,
Just it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't start at
our
slavery, and to go
history
back
go
to what?
our history goes back tens of thousands of years. I mean, if you look at the Ishango bone, I mean that's like
Hmm.
22,000 years old. I mean, beyond that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what they did was was very incredible, in that they erased your history. They cut off your
Hmm.
classical civilization, and they told you that you had no culture
Mhm,
when you were the
Hmm.
originators of culture. And when I say you, I'm talking about us as a
mhm,
people, African people. We are the
Hmm.
originators of
Right.
science. We are the originators of mathematics. We are the originators of cosmology. We are the originators of architecture,
Of
building,
soap and making
uh,
them wash themselves.
philosophy, right? We medicine, just hygiene. Europeans didn't get hygiene until like the 15th, 16th century. They didn't even know what soap was until the Moors brought that in, and told her, "Hey, man, you guys can't be sleeping with your
Hmm.
animals in the house." That's why
Oh,
the
shit,
plague
no.
came through and just ravished Europe, because
Right.
they didn't have no concept of hygiene, right? So they literally lost half of their population. But just like Europeans today, they like to go back to Greece and Rome as their classical civilizations, which aren't even don't even belong to them, because those are Mediterranean influenced civilizations, and they were originally influenced by us through ancient Kemet, right?
Right.
They were literally
Gotcha.
all those
Right.
Greek philosophers, and even if they did existed, they first were coming to Kemet to learn. And our
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
the priests were telling them,
Yeah.
you guys are children, right? So they basically cut all of that off from you, and conquered
Yep.
and stole it, right? So now Kemet, they don't even consider Egypt to be a part of Africa, even though it's in Africa. That's how crazy it is, right? And we have to accept that, right?
right.
But it's no, because if
That's
if you go there,
that's
you,
the
you see the
craziest thing
people.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
There's a line in the film where it was talking about
Hmm.
could you learn about Egyptology and the science of Egypt? What is that? What is Egyptology? But you have these
Hmm.
explorers and basically these white people trying to find some sort of European influence in Egypt. It talked about John D. Rockefeller, who spent
Yeah.
$15 million, and we're talking back in the 30s, just to
Yeah.
he wanted archaeologists to go over there and find some
Hmm.
evidence of European descent in Egypt, and basically lost all his
Hmm.
money doing that. But
Yeah.
that has been the whole thing that they've been doing over time. Is
Yeah.
you guys are new to this. I would like, you guys are Europeans. You guys are new to
Yeah.
this. We've been
Yeah.
doing this. I shared with Shatara, and just as an aside, I went to Israel last year, right before the pandemic.
Hmm.
Now, of all that you read, and you go to the tomb and you see all of these monuments of early Christianity, they never talk about the Egyptian tombs, the tombs that are on the side of the, what is it, the Mount of Olives, which I have been there for
Yeah.
10,000 years. And I'm like, in all the books that I've
So
read
how
and
many sites
everything
did
that
you
I've
go
ever
to?
seen, no one ever talks about what's that.
How many sites did you go to? Did you see in Israel?
I went to all of them. So everything that was on the list, I went to every single one of them. But what was
Okay.
not
Did
on
you
the
did you
list,
go
but
into
what
any
is evident
temples?
there, I did. In the basements. I
Okay.
mean, I did the whole tour.
Okay.
But what was evident is there is there is Africa in Israel, but no one talks about that. No one says that I've heard.
I think
Just an aside. So
Israel is actually part of Africa. It's like on the African plate. I don't know what that plate is called, but it's part of Africa. All that area was
mhm.
considered to be Northeast Africa, all the way up to Turkey and
It
all of
is.
that stuff. That was considered to be Northeast
Yep.
Africa, right? So that's where all Christianity comes
Wow.
from. It's from that. It's from that area, right? It really comes from ancient Kemet itself. That Christianity story is 4,000, 6,000 years old. It goes back to,
Right.
you know, we have records of the pyramid text
I believe it.
2400 BC, 20, 2,400 years before
400 years.
Christ. We have that story.
Right.
So what the Europeans did, what they just
2000.
came in and took that story, subtracted after the Africans from it, and repackaged it and resold it to you to enslave you through it. That's what happened. But if
Mhm.
you go to Kemet, like if you do the study tour with like Tony Browder, you you'll go to temple after temple, and the temples are huge, and these temples have been around
Right.
for they don't even know how old the temples are. They're thousands, four,
Mhm.
5, 6,000 years old, and writings all on the wall, and you can see all of the stories, and you can see where all of this stuff comes from, all the way from Cairo to really Sudan. I spent 2 weeks. I spent 3 weeks. I've been to Egypt twice. I spent the first time I spent 3 weeks there, and then I spent a week in Sudan. And we actually went to Sudan. We went to Jebel Barkal, and we saw Merowe, and we slept in front of the pyramids, and I mean, you can see where the
Ooh.
culture comes from. So this is the part that they, this is their cognitive dissonance, right? They have to erase all of this stuff because they have to find a justification for slavery, what they did to you, right? This is the cognitive dissonance that's talked about in the film. So they can't tell you, they can't justify enslaving you, right? Because in their version of the story, you were savages, right? You had no culture, and they had to come in because you weren't utilizing your resources correctly. So they had to come in Africa and show you guys how to utilize your own resources, enslave you, civilize you, and help make you build their nation, right? And tell you that you're savage and animalistic and you had no
Mhm.
culture and you're culturally deficient, right? When that was really them,
Right.
right? So in order to justify that, they can't say that, hey, we enslaved the mothers and fathers of civilization who gave us all of this culture. So what they have to do is they have to now say that ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet was not an African civilization. And that's why you mentioned the whole Rockefeller thing, because they were trying to find a middle east, so-called Middle Eastern origin for ancient Kemet, which they never found, right? They never found it. So
You can keep
you're not going
looking.
So
to
there's a
find
segment
they're
where
not
you
going to
talk
tell you
about
because it all comes from the South.
the war on history.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Everything you're talking about is
Mhm.
like just like the war on history, and it's just like what Shaun had said. Even in school, for myself going to college, it was mandatory for me to learn, and these are mandatory classes as a freshman.
Mhm.
American War, American Civilization, World War. It was all like American, American, American.
Yeah,
And trust me, now I know like a lot of that was all bull. This is your story. However, for me to even want to learn about my people where I come from, I had to wait for my electives to come
yeah,
up to get that was never mandatory.
yeah,
And then looking back at it, I'm like, okay, so I got these student loans, I'm paying for y'all to feed me the lie.
yeah,
That's really what
yeah.
and if I don't have a thirst for my own history, well then nobody's going to tell me anything,
Correct.
and it just goes back to the whole, the values, the principles, the interests,
Yep,
you are
yep,
stripped of
yep.
you are stripped
Mhm.
of it.
Because
And that's and it comes up relevant today.
when you're going to school, you're not learning your cultural values, interests, and principles.
Hmm.
You're learning their cultural values, interests, and principles. And they don't have any cultural values.
Right.
Their culture is about dominating and subjugating people who are they
Right.
racialize people. It's a social racial hierarchy, class system, capitalism where
Mhm.
black people are the capital, right? And they're monetizing your body, so you
Yep.
are a
Right.
commodity to them. and you're just there for entertainment and extraction of resources for them, and you're at the bottom permanently of the social
Right.
hierarchy that they've established for you. So and then when you're going to college, they're socializing you to be operative in their white supremacist system, right? Because you don't have a nation. They
Right.
destroyed your nation, right? They destroyed your nation. They denationalized you. They gave you the term black, right? And they give themselves the term white, which are social statuses, right?
Right.
Right? White by definition
Yep.
is a privileged status. It was put into law in
Right.
1681, right? I believe the state was Maryland, and then 1691 in Virginia, and they were based in the anti-miscegenation laws, really about keeping white women from marrying black African
From
indentured
marrying black
servants,
men.
right? So then you
Right.
had the whole Bacon's Rebellion, and then you had the elites come in and say, "Hey, we need to stop this. We can't ever let white people and we can't let these European indentured servants ever join with these African indentured servants again, because we're going to have problems." So what they do is they create a hierarchy, and they create the term white, and they say, well, Europeans are now going to be classified as white, which is a privileged protected
Right.
class, and these black people are going to be dehumanized. They're going to be turned into an object where they have no social status, right? So you have a continuation of that into this day. And now they're doing the same thing with
Mm-hmm.
feminism. They're coming in and they're making
Oh
black
yeah.
women, they're telling you that you're oppressed class, and they're telling you that the black man is your
Mm-hmm.
oppressor. So now they're creating another, they're telling you that, you know, under racial sex stratification, that the black man is on top, and he's doing the same thing that the white man is doing to his woman, you know, because he's
Mm-hmm.
patriarchal and he's oppressing you. So now you still have this,
Mm-hmm.
now you have this division, right? So and it works for them because of divide and conquer. So what we have to do, get
That's the.
back, you know,
Mm-hmm.
throw that away, throw all of these European ideologies away, and get back to our
Mm-hmm.
African culture, because we already had all the answers. These
Yeah.
Europeans just got here the day before yesterday.
I
So
think,
speak.
one of the things, you had Dr. Umar Johnson in the film,
Hmm.
which, I love him because he has no cut cards and he tells it exactly.
Hmm.
It's the bitter pill that we all need to take.
Hmm.
And you touched on the going to black colleges and or even white colleges, and just how the education system as a whole is set up. It's not set up for us, and one of the things that Dr. Umar had pointed out was that integration was probably one of the worst things that happened to us, because
Hmm.
before that, prior to that, because we really didn't have a choice, we had to be
Yeah.
self-sufficient. We had to be the self-determination was a part of us, because that's what we had to do. The
Hmm.
minute that we decided, or however it was decided, to integrate, we lost a lot of that. We lost a
Yeah.
lot of our self-determination. We lost a lot of our drive to build our communities and build our families, because it's like mixing with the other. I'll tell this, let me just say this aside. It may it there's let me just say this. you know I went to Rutgers, which is not a HBCU, but what I would find is,
Hmm.
on learning, when I hear a white man's voice, I have a hard time
Hmm.
learning. I have to go over the
Really?
notes. I have to do,
Yeah.
and I find it even today, just listening to their voice. I cannot, and I'm a pretty intelligent woman. I can get, but it's something about that voice. It's like I have to listen 3 4 times. I have to
It doesn't
take
resonate
pay
with your
special
spirit.
attention, because it doesn't resonate for me. What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. I said it doesn't resonate with your spirit. You
Yes,
know?
and that's
Yeah.
that's deep. That's
Yeah.
really, really deep. And I went to,
Yeah.
like I said, it wasn't an HBCU, but that I
Hmm.
know that for the way that I learn, and and I think there's a lot of Black people who we're in the same position. We're in the same position.
Yeah,
That voice, in and of itself, whatever it's the octave, it's something. It takes
yeah,
me a while to
yeah.
to get it.
You
Yeah,
can,
it doesn't
That's
resonate with
like
because
my
the body,
Beulah,
soul.
that's because the
Beulah.
soul doesn't want to ingest it. You know what I mean? It's fighting. You got to force it down. It's
Yeah.
something that you're not supposed to be putting into your
Ooh.
body. I mean, like I said, it's their education system is not really an education system. It's an indoctrination. It's a training
Right.
center. It's to train you how to
For
function in
us.
white
Right.
society. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
us.
Because they want to keep the thing
Absolutely.
going. They don't want to tell you who you
Give you some
are, right?
right.
So they're giving you European
Mhm.
tools, and they don't even know what they're teaching. They're theorizing half the time, and you know what I mean. So you're just tapped into your divine feminine nature that's telling you to reject it. But a lot of people
Mhm.
don't. A lot of
Amongst some
people
other
don't
things.
have that
Yeah.
discernment. I mean, so they're
Right.
going in there and getting brainwashed. So at least you have a African consciousness,
That's
which is cool.
Yeah, and
so.
good. Well, and it took it's still developing, and it now that
Uh-huh.
I am a mother, it's something
Hmm.
I want to instill in my child to make sure, because I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, you go to school, this is what you have to do. I don't want the officers showing up at my door, but
yeah.
this is how we're going to learn on the side. I remember growing up. And we went to school in Jersey, and at
Uh-huh.
Teaneck High School, and I remember it was a lot of Jewish kids. You remember this, Shatara? Now, one thing, what did they do on the
Okay.
weekends? What did they do on the weekends?
Oh, they're family. They use no
But they went
electricity,
to Hebrew
Mm.
and it
school.
is,
Remember that? They would
yeah,
go to
yeah,
Hebrew school. They would
yeah.
learn Hebrew.
All walking on the street. Yep.
Yeah.
We
They
don't,
walk. They don't use electricity, no cars, no nothing, and it's all family. It's all a family
but we
unit
don't
all
do that.
together.
Well, they
Like there's
understand
no there.
they understand the power of culture, right? Because their
Right,
culture is still
I respect it.
intact,
I respect
right? So they have cultural
right,
practices,
it.
uh, certain values, interests, and principles, again, that are embedded in their culture that they're not going to just give away. They're not going to stray from because that's what keeps them intact, right? So, Black people in
right,
America, so called Black people, have had that culture basically erased. And now, for the first time, it's within reach because we're in the technological age. So, where it's easily accessible, you don't have to, the time that
right.
you have to dedicate to learning your history and culture is so small now. I mean, so the information is at our fingertips. So we can get back to
Exactly.
that culture, but we just don't see the value in it, right? Because to us, our culture is American culture. We don't look at African
We
as
want to
a
assimilate.
Mm.
right.
Right,
That's what we have done. We've
right.
assimilated. At first, we were segregated, right? So we tried separation, and we actually built very strong, independent, functional communities. When you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood,
Talk about it.
Wilmington, North Carolina, Detroit, Black Bottom, Paradise Valley, you see these functional communities, but those communities came under heavy attack. In some cases, like Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Mhm.
it was actually bombed, and I think you see
Burnt
that in
down.
that
Wow.
Lovecraft Country on HBO. You see that, right? They actually
Yes.
Yeah,
they actually
yeah,
destroyed
yes.
that. And then everywhere else around the country, they claim eminent. They flood it with drugs. They claim eminent domain. They take the land and they ran
Snowfall.
freeways through
Mhm.
Black communities, and they integrated you, right? And in the integration, we lost everything. We lost our businesses. We lost our schools. We lost our
Yeah.
independent medical facilities. We had Black doctors. We had everything. We had Black grocery stores. And so then after that phase, we after integration, in that process of us losing everything, then we totally assimilated, and we totally just drank the Kool-Aid, and we totally started
Mm.
taking on other ideologies. And that has been disastrous for us.
Right.
You know? So we got to get
So
back.
let me just ask you this, and I know we talked on it before.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We have to get back.
Hmm.
We have to get back. And in a world where we're in the middle of social media, this is, you've even said you put some good posts out. Somebody said put it together. We're educating each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that as Black people, we're building so much pride in ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and our history, which is a beautiful thing. However, I can't help but to notice that being that this is the most I've ever seen us on, let's say, TV, just
Mm-hmm.
in the media presence, our family system in the front of my eyes is broken down. I don't understand why, I see a new show and I'm excited, but there's no family, there's no Black father, Black mother, Black children. It's, a television commercial with a Black woman. This is good to see her in this car. And then she has a white husband with mixed babies in the back seat. I'm seeing a lot of this. I'm seeing just a lot of us not, again, they're not reflecting us.
Well, you can
and
blame
and that
feminism
part
for
right
that. You can blame
okay.
feminism for
Mm-hmm.
that, right? And you can in
Okay.
particular Black feminism, because Black feminism has its
You see it though?
root.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Black feminism
And
has
Black
its
Lives
root
Matter.
in the women's movement as a white supremacist movement. The original feminist movement was a white supremacist movement.
Right.
It was all about elevating
Right.
the white woman up to
Yeah.
the
Think of Planned
status of the
Parenthood.
white man so they can rule and conquer together, right? So the first
Mm-hmm.
wave feminism was it started because white women were upset because the Black man supposedly had got the right to vote. So they were like, if you give these Negroes the right to vote, they're going to come and rule over us. And they tricked the Black women into thinking that too,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then you have second wave feminism come along,
Mhm.
and second, there's a book called Subverted. It's by Ellen Browder, I believe the author is, and she was a writer for Cosmopolitan magazine, right? And what she was saying was the
Mm-hmm.
whole
Mhm.
premise of the book is how she helped. This is important. She helped the sexual revolution hijack the women's movement. So this whole feminism thing was not about, it was only about selling you stuff, and it was very
Mhm.
anti-family. It was about the taking the woman out of the
Mm-hmm.
home,
Mhm.
challenging her traditional gender role, right? And making the Black
What,
woman
what's her name?
independent and be on her own, right? I'm a strong, independent, don't need no
Mm-hmm.
man. So this is the theory
Yep.
that has been
Uh-huh.
driving the Black community since
Mhm.
the 60s. Now you look at the early 60s and you look at the out of wedlock birth rate, it was only about, I don't know, in the low
Mm-hmm.
20%. Now it's like 80%,
Right.
right? You look at
Yep.
the marriage rate plummeted. I mean, only one out of every four Black women gets married nowadays. So this is it wasn't always
Yep.
like this, right?
Very.
Even after slavery, the family got back together. If you look at the Black community in the early
Mhm.
20th century, the
Oh
early
yeah.
1900s, it was not
You
like
look at
how
the
it is now.
census records. Yeah.
Yeah. Black people
Right.
black
Absolutely.
people were together. It wasn't until the 60s and the 70s and the 80s when you start to have the introduction of feminism, which is really just the female version of white supremacy, right? That's not to take away from
Mm-hmm.
from from
Mhm.
from Africana womanism, because I
Right.
could get down with
Mhm.
because I feel like, as Black women, you guys have your own
Okay.
stories to tell, just like us as Black men, we have our own stories to
Right.
tell. But in
Absolutely.
order to
Mhm.
understand racism, you have to
Right.
understand racism. Racism, I don't know if you guys are hip to Dr. Tommy J. Curry, but Dr. Tommy J. Curry has a book called The Man Not Me. You need to read it. Definitely need to read it.
Mhm.
Um,
My
so
my
he
last.
talks about
It's
racism.
we have an
Talks
uncle,
about
Tommy J. Curry.
Okay. So he talks about
Go ahead. Go
racism
ahead.
as a misandric aggression. Misandric meaning anti-man. Misandric aggression
Mm.
that
Mhm.
utilizes sexual violence and lethal violence, and it's directed towards the men, not towards the women. But in feminist
Mm.
theory, they teach you that the Black man is oppressing you, right? They teach you that the Black man is
Mhm.
oppressing
Men in
you
general.
and you need all of this liberation, and all this Black nationalistic stuff that these Black men over here are talking about gotta go. And you're gonna need to be progressive. And in order to be progressive, you need to be part of our thing, right? So that's where you see the destruction of the Black family. That's where you see the split, and that's why Tamika Mallory could do a Cadillac commercial and not even mention Black men and talking about Black women are going to lead the nation, and we're taking control. And it's like, where's the men at? You didn't just get here just by the women, So we have our original African culture saw men and women as equal. So if we get back to that, we'll be okay.
Absolutely.
If we keep following the European, we're gonna be in trouble.
Right. I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I totally know that when I put on my TV, I know that this is just what is, an effort to feed me.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, Black people don't get married. I don't believe that Black men are not the head of their households. I don't believe it. I'm seeing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Don't
I
always
believe
believe
it.
what you say.
I'm like, no, I'm not believing
They
it.
have to
We're just
erase
trying
your
to, and I have to understand
protector
that.
and your provider in order to conquer you, right? Because
It's too much effort.
Yeah.
It's effort.
Yeah.
It's effort.
what they really want to do
But
is
this is what they
exterminate
know,
us and have access to you.
Yeah. So yeah, and to
Right.
touch on that, because
Up
one
here.
of the things in the film, it was talking about genetic annihilation. Shatara, we were talking about this. We talk about this
Oh, yeah, I wanted to get
all the time because it's such a real thing. So, when you think of all of the technology that they've come across to kind of preserve themselves, you've got surrogates and artificial insemination, you've got AI, you've got cloning, you got all of these things, and I'm not to take away from the sciences, but why do they have that? Because, and even growing up in school, what did you learn about the dominant and recessive gene? You learned about we talked about Darwinism and survival of the fittest, but what's going to always dominate over the recessive? The dominant gene. And you can look at us and see what's dominant. What's that?
Europeans only make 10% of the world population. 90% of the world
but
are what they
somehow we
call
got in
people
our
of color,
vocabulary that they're the majority,
and we're the minority,
but
right?
but
That's the whole
somehow
trick,
they're the
right?
majority, right? But
Right.
they
If you
are
look at,
recessing. They are dying off.
they're at
Do you
negative
believe
birth
that?
rate.
They are exactly.
That can
They
be
are, which
empirically
means
proven.
that they are
They're dying off.
Like
off more than they are having
Yeah,
babies. And that's a real.
producing. Yeah,
It's a real thing. So
our populations are
it's
exploding.
on.
you know,
Yeah. So on the,
yeah.
not to take away from, and that's why that there's the, we listen to Black women in the listen to Black people in the medical field. There's a reason for that, why they just ignore us. But that's a whole nother story. But to get back to, on the one hand, it's like you can kind of understand the people if you're fading out. You're gonna do everything and anything to make sure that your gene prevails. So
It's all
just on a
about
human
survival
sense,
for them.
yeah, you kind of get it. But the way that the tactics and the things that they do, because that's, it's that gene. We talked about how for us, that divide and conquer, that's not something in, within us. We don't really have that gene. But, you see the serial killers and, the people that the terrorists here in the United States, and you wonder like, what would cause a person to do that? That's a genetic mutation. I said it.
They
I
have
mean what
been
I said, which is
disconnected.
something like we don't have that.
Yeah,
Do you know
they've
what I
been
mean? Like we don't.
disconnected from.
So that genetic annihilation, that's a real thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the strongest theories that we have to kind of explain white supremacy, right? Is this fear that they have of genetic annihilation. You can improve empirically that almost every European nation is at negative birth rate, just like you said. They're not producing children to replace themselves, right? So they know that they're becoming extinct and they're fighting for survival, right? So that's why they have to dominate, take control of all resources. They have to colonize Africa. They have to colonize the world in order to have total control, right? In order to protect themselves against their own extinction. But I don't know if I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if that's inevitable. We don't even think like that. We have humanity. We're about improving civilization, improving culture, inventing culture, uplifting brother and sister. We don't have this conquer, racial subjugation mindset. We don't have this capitalistic
Survival of
mindset.
the fittest. because we're
Yeah,
gonna be out of here. Right.
they call it social. They call our culture socialism because we have our original African cultures are built on social cooperation, balance between man and
Right.
woman. The men do the physical hard labor and planting the fields, and the women come and plant this. Women and children come and plant the seeds and nurture the seeds. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this balance, right? And you see that in Africa. You see that in ancient Kemet. You never see the man without the woman. You never see the male deity without the woman deity. It's the
Exactly.
complementarity of man and woman
Mm-hmm.
working together, social cohesion. In European society, they come in with the whole patriarchy thing, so they put man at the top and woman on the bottom, right? Because our
Mm-hmm.
culture was based on agriculture. Their culture was based on hunting, hunter and gatherer. So the man has all the power
Mm-hmm.
in their culture because the woman can't hunt. So she turns into a liability, right? So she has no power and he has to
Mm-hmm.
constantly dominate her, right? He's just dominating her. So
Right.
we can't bring that patriarchy European nonsense into the African community and apply that to black men as if we belong to the patriarchy. Our African cultures were mainly matrifocal, matrilineal. In ancient Egypt, the royal line
Absolutely.
went through the royal wife, went through the woman, not the man. So we
The
had no
mother.
problem
Mm-hmm.
until European came in and they begin to invert everything and turn everything backwards and then tell us that we were uncivilized and we had no culture. So and we believe them, unfortunately, because we go to their schools,
Wow.
right?
We believe them.
Yeah, because we go to their schools and we get so-called
Right, right.
educated by them, right? And then we come back in our community with all these
Mm-hmm.
European ideologies and all this feminism and all this patriarchy stuff, and we go to war against our men and we destroy the family, right? You can't have a family, you can't have a nation without a
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
family. The original African concept of God was man, woman, child, the family. Man, woman, and child. Balance, right? It's not, you don't subtract the man from the equation, right? You need the man and the woman to produce the
Hmm.
child, right? And the child gets the best of
Absolutely.
both of them, right? So that's the image of God, right?
Sounds people.
Of creation, right? So if
Hmm.
you look at Christianity,
Right.
they take the
Yep.
woman out. You know, you don't even see God is some
Mm-hmm.
white man in the sky that's telling you what to do and condemning you,
Yeah.
right? So our cultural
Mm.
framework
Mm-hmm.
is off, our religious framework is off, our sociological framework is off. You know what I mean? But all we have to do is the easy solution: go back
Absolutely.
to Africa. Now you don't have to physically go
And
back there,
just to
but
kind of
go back
touch on,
mentally.
but go back to the teachings,
Well,
and one of the things,
mhm,
in the film you talked about the white Jesus, which is still controversial to this day,
mhm,
and how Dr. Umar was talking about the concept of the black church. It's really
mhm,
it's good because it
mhm,
you talk about, you have to feed, you're making everybody accountable and feeding the whole, so everybody's got to be accountable,
mhm,
but we can't do that for ourselves. We can do it to the church and we can make the pastor rich, but we can't do
mhm.
it for ourselves in a community, the community minded. Like that was I mean, it's real. Like I said, he had a lot of those bitter pills you got to swallow. We got to look at that. Like,
Well,
why can't we do that?
yeah,
Um,
the church is a
Another
business,
thing I
though.
wanted to point
That's why
out.
he brought that up.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That and the sooner we
Well,
learn about it, I think the better off we'll be. But
mhm,
that's a whole nother story.
mhm.
Um,
You got a white Jesus, right? You got a white Jesus, and then you have a white Cleopatra. These things just don't make
Well,
sense. If it just
if
they
your
just don't
image
make
of
sense.
if your image of God is of a white man, right? Then what does that say? What does your mind tell you
Mhm.
about yourself? You're black. You must be the
right,
devil then, right? In the
Right.
story, right? You must be outside of the grace of
yep,
God.
the black,
If God is white, right? And white
right.
man came to come take you guys out of Africa to come civilize you because you guys were savages and animals, and thank God for slavery,
Hmm.
because if it wasn't for slavery, we wouldn't know this white Jesus. And it's like, how backwards is that, right? We gotta like grow up, right?
Not
We gotta
backwards.
grow up. So,
And it's so hard to grow up for some of us because you're breaking down what we've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like teach a baby how to walk. Like, you're not going to teach that baby how to
Yeah.
unwalk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I'm used to drinking juice since I was a kid, it's going to be hard for me to say I'm never going to have juice again. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
you are trying to break a construct. Like, this is what a lot of us, this is how we grew up. This is what we know. For example,
Trauma.
I went to
Trauma.
Israel last year, right before COVID. And I
Mm-hmm.
went through the tombs, I did all the whole tour, I saw the tombs. And one of the things that I saw that was never mentioned in any book that I ever read was the Egyptian tombs that were on, I believe, the Mount of Olives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in all the books that I've read, like
Mm-hmm.
I said, and nobody's ever talked about. And these tombs were dated 10,000 years before Christ.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
ever talked about it. Nobody ever said, nobody ever told me. And it even I'm on this tour and I'm like, it wasn't even pointed out on the tour. It was kind of like figure it
Mm-hmm.
out. So, just do the math
Mm-hmm.
in your head, in which I'm standing there and I'm like, okay, this is 10,000 years before Jesus Christ touched down, but we're in Israel. But I never heard of any sort of, Africa being Israel or anything at all. That was just, what do you do with that?
According to the Bible and according to Judaism, the Christianity and Judaism comes out of Egypt, right? Out of Egypt, I call my son, right? In the New Testament, and even the Canaanites. See, we don't understand history, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can tell that to their people because it makes them look good, right? Right. But the Christianity and what we're calling Judaism comes out of Egypt through the Hyksos invasion, right, around 1650 BC. So when they come into Egypt, they come in escaping famine, right? They come into Egypt escaping famine in 1640, 1650, right? And we welcome them in as we did everybody. We do the Europeans. We're very humane, welcoming people, and they come in, and
Right.
then they other invaders came in and conquered, and then we kick them out. And when they leave, they didn't have a language, they didn't have a history, they didn't have a culture when they came into Egypt. When they left, they had all three. They had a language, they had a history, they had a culture, and they had a religion, right? And that religion we know today as Judaism and Christianity. So again, they're not telling you the
Wow.
whole story. When you go to Egypt right now, you can go to temple after temple after temple and after temple and really walk through these temples, and they're thousands of years old. Some of them you don't even know. There could be 10,000 years old. And you're seeing the pictures on the wall, and you're seeing these stories from your ancestors on the wall. I mean, in great detail. I'm actually coming out with a follow up to Out of Darkness called Heavy is the Crown. I'm literally going to finish it probably within the next week or so and get it out to you guys. But I'm
Oh,
showing you
wow.
all of this, the
Oh,
African origins of religion. So this is the follow up to Out of Darkness. But I'm showing you all this. So we have no idea of what
the
we
crown.
lost. We have no idea of what we lost. We
Right.
lost a great
Mhm.
deal. And we let other people come in and repackage our history and culture and sell it back to us and enslave us through it.
And
Mhm.
just in talking about how we let them repackage it, you touched on hip
Mm-hmm.
hop, the
Mm-hmm.
revolution through hip hop and what's going on. And I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the things that really stood out for me, is talking about the ancestors manifesting
Mm-hmm.
themselves through hip hop, in the way
Yeah.
that, the haircuts and the clothing and the beats and, the rhythm, and how that knowledge, for, the rapper that, grew up in Queens and never been to Africa, probably never, doesn't know too much, but how they were able to channel that was was
Yeah.
was nothing short of divine. And the
Yeah.
film pointed that out. So, if you could talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was so deep.
Yeah. Well, hip hop is us. Hip hop comes from us. It goes all the way back to the griots, right? The Jele, the storytellers of Africa. When you have the drums and the rhythm, and you got the
Right.
storyteller, you got the elders telling the story, right? And we're the people of the water. We are a rhythmic people. We birthed this stuff, and this is the Parank, right? The Parank is the intergenerational transference of knowledge and wisdom and information, right? So this is just always what we've
Mm-hmm.
done. And then just in the modern sense, with in America, we gave it the name hip hop, but this is something that we've always done. The difference is in America, we've given the power of it because we don't understand culture. We don't understand culture and protecting that culture. We let other culture vultures come in and monetize our history and subtract the spirituality from it and turn it into a strictly materialistic. It's not even an art form. It's just a business at this point. So they're just, they're putting their kids through college on our expense, right? And they're pumping all of these negative stereotypes into our community, right? All this criminology and all of this stuff, and we celebrate it, right? And we don't take ownership of it, but we're not taught to take ownership of it. So that's what the problem. That's why I got out of hip hop, and that's why it became so frustrating because I'm seeing all these other people of other skin colors, and they're making all this money, and we're the ones that's acting like buffoons, like it's a minstrel show, and we're not. We're getting paid crumbs. We don't understand ownership. We don't own our masters. You know what I mean? That was the reason why I started my own company, because I wanted to own my stuff. You know what I mean? I want to own.
Right.
So we need to have the concept of ownership and controlling our own cultural products, and that's one of the things that Dr. Umar touched on.
Question, if you could go back all the way back and rewind, and how you said how we need to pretty much, claim it and own it, and just in regards to like hip hop and music, and that's us. How and where would you start in terms of like where we would be today, saying like that's ours, that's us? Like they got to ask us for permission. Like how would you change that in the past if you could have?
In the past, well, we have to stop having the mindset that we have to depend on the European for everything, right? So now I'll give you a perfect example. Like me, I'll segue it into the film industry, right? Like me, I worked at Google for 7 years.
Yep.
I was a field tech at Google for 7 years. And I literally walked off my job one day because I just felt tired. I was just tired of being a worker. And I was like, I want to own my own company. So I started my own company, 2015, right? So I had the mindset of, look, I can do this on my own. Now, as a filmmaker, I don't have to take my film to anybody if I don't want to. I can distribute it myself, right? I can distribute it myself. I can put my film on Amazon myself or Vimeo, sell it online, sell it myself. So it's very simple, right? It's very simple. It's just have the mindset of nationhood, of doing for self, of I'm going to do this for my community. I'm going to take ownership of the things that I produce, and I'm going to take ownership of them. I'm going to take ownership of my resources and use it for my people and for my community, right? And I don't have to go to the Europeans to put this out. I can do it myself, even if I make 80% of the money that I would have made with him. I feel better having ownership and control over my stuff, owning my stuff, right? And not having to because once you start dealing with them, you have to compromise, right? You have to compromise. And then you compromise and you compromise and you compromise and you compromise and you compromise, and pretty soon you've lost yourself. You lost what your original intentions were for going into. I feel like that's what happened to hip hop. If you look at hip hop in the early days, it was very conscious, very, very conscious, very spiritual. And now all of that is gone, right? It's all about money, materialism, and get drunk and high and lean and and Xannies, and you know what I mean? And it's just like it's out of control.
Yeah.
It's out of control. But we just need to get back to it.
So you're so right. Getting back to and owning and putting it out yourself. So as a stand-up comic, I've been doing comedy for a long time. I mean, I got 15 years in the game. I'm a seasoned comic. And as a Black woman, I would be considered a rarity, sometimes I come in a venue, it's like, oh, are you the R&B singer? And it's like, no, I'm respect my funny. Like that's, it's going to be good. That's, pretty much how I have to show up. And, we would be considered, on the urban circuit, so to speak, I'm Def Jam, all of that. However, I have no problem with that. That's dope to me. I need to be able to resonate with my people. If I can't go somewhere and get with my own people, then there's a problem.
Right.
So I have to find peace in that and comfort in that. And it's really knowing who you are and who you want to be, you know? because a lot of times in terms of success in comedy, it's measured upon let's say mainstream. So
Yeah.
in black comedy, there the color line does come up.
Yeah.
If you're not mainstream, you're not making it.
Yeah.
And I had to really come into a comfort with myself to say, if I'm making my own people laugh,
Yeah.
then I made it.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Hey, you're.
It's not for me to make Seinfeld laugh.
Mhm.
And now, don't get me wrong, I respect what he does, but that's just not my type of funny.
Right.
That's just not, what we do. So sometimes a lot of black comics, and I will say this, very candidly, that sometimes a lot of black comics have this, idea that success is making it to the point where white people recognize you.
Right.
That's pretty much, where
Yeah.
you get, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And a lot of times I'm like, follow what you want. Oh man, why you this, why you that? And it's just like, because that's not where my mind is really at. Now, granted, you're welcome to come to my living room.
Mhm.
I'm a woman, so I talk on, Indian woman can be there.
Mhm.
You could be of all cultures because we're talking as women.
Mhm.
However, you're getting it from the voice of a black
Right.
woman, and that's very clear.
Right. Right. Right.
So, it's disappointing for me a
Yeah.
lot of times when I'm just like, damn, like, did you just say you got to make it to this and that?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
in order to be seen, because I'm like, that's not the case for me.
Yeah.
That's not my race.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not. And guess what? And when I put stuff out, you're so right. I'm not waiting
Yeah.
on X, Y, and Z to pick my funny up.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting on anybody. I'm doing it myself.
And you just got to be. I mean, you sound like you're pretty comfortable. You're able to make a
Well,
living.
yeah.
You're able to make a living and do what you love, and keep going and doing it for your people, right? And that's what makes you happy. You're not worried about white
I do.
approval, because who
Ugh,
who gave them the moral position that we should be looking to them for any type of acceptance after looking at their history, right? So it's
They
just,
did.
again,
right.
doing for
Right.
self. You might take a pay
Mm-hmm.
cut, but we're not a material
Yeah.
people. We
And
are a
don't get me
spiritual
wrong.
people, right? So we have to get away from this
Really not.
materialism,
We're really
get
not.
back to our
Mhm.
spiritual base. There's going to be some losses. There's going to be some sacrifices that we're going to have to make. You know what I mean? But in the long
Mhm.
term, it's about
Mhm.
ownership. It's about having a do for self mindset. And it's about having a sense of community and really a sense of nationalism, and getting back to the concept of nationhood, right? And having
Nationhood.
our own land, right? Having our own resources, being able to
Mhm.
protect that land and those resources and functioning properly, right? And in order to do that, we got to study
Right.
African history and culture.
Right. Yeah, keep it in order.
Yeah.
Know where you came from.
Yeah.
Mhm. So before we wrap up, because there was something I wanted to talk about. It was mentioned in the
Hmm.
film, was the Illuminati. And to be honest, like outside of the little, the memes and little stuff you see on Instagram and Facebook, no one talks about this. So I thank you, because the documentary really demystified the whole thing. Like it's not the hardest, hoodoo voodoo kind of,
Yeah.
theory to understand. It's just understanding, a people who, when we talk about Europeans and, the colonizers, their goal is to steal, kill, destroy, and conquer. And they do that
Mhm.
by taking knowledge. So, what better
Yeah.
way to do it, when you talk about the illuminated ones, is, it's a way where they co opt the knowledge. That's what they do. So, if you could just
Yeah.
speak on that, because honestly, I've never seen a film that even talks about it, and then talks about it in the way that you did
Yeah.
and broke it down, where it wasn't, some, conspiracy theory kind of
Yeah.
idea up in the air. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was like, before I became into African consciousness, I was really heavy into the Illuminati, like crazy heavy. Like, I was talking about it all the time. I was literally going crazy because I'm seeing the symbols everywhere on television. telling my family members,
Yep.
look, that's Illuminati. And I'm just going crazy. But that's what really got me starting to read, because there's truth to it, right? But I'll tell you what it is. The
Oh yeah.
Illuminati is our science. It's our science. We
Yeah.
are the original
Right.
Masons, right? The
Right.
Moors brought that in. Okay, I don't know if people know, but Europe was actually
Yep.
from 711 to 1492. African Moors had conquered Spain and a large part of
Mm-hmm.
Italy, and they brought, and this is at a time where Europeans didn't even know what soap was. They were living with their animals.
Right.
They had no concept of hygiene. They had no real infrastructure after Rome broke down. Rome was conquered by the Visigoths, and these Visigoths were just straight up savages and barbarians. So they actually destroyed Europe. And then the plague came in because of hygiene, right? The plague came in and just wiped out
Mm-hmm.
half of their population. So the Moors come in,
Yep.
bringing the knowledge from ancient Egypt after ancient Kemet had been conquered by Rome, right? Islam actually
Right.
preserved all of that knowledge, and that is what you're calling Masonry and the Illuminati, the Enlightened Ones. So they bring that into
Exactly.
Europe. So that becomes, Europeans take that, right? And this is how the Renaissance, the Renaissance starts, because Africans actually built all of those universities and all of that stuff. So what Europeans do is they take
Mm-hmm.
all of that knowledge, the relationship between mother and son, Masonry, all of
Mm-hmm.
our ancient science, and they subtract the spirituality again, and they use it as a method of
Mm-hmm.
domination and social control. And then what they do, they tell you, oh, that's the
So,
devil, right? So now we thinking all this
mm-hmm.
Illuminati stuff is the
So you don't
devil.
look
Oh,
at
that's
it.
the devil. Stay away from the devil. And that's the way they keep. So the Europeans is
Right.
laughing because they're like, look, we could just take their stuff, and they're not even gonna come back to it because they think it's evil, right? So that's the whole thing.
Exactly.
So, but there's black, there's
Yeah.
African
Yeah.
lodges,
I mean.
but
Mm-hmm.
we just need we need to
Yep.
grow up
It.
again. We need to grow up and look at stuff for what it really is, right? It's really not all spooky and stuff. It's really our knowledge and history and cultural practices that they take it from us and they rule us through.
Yep.
Mm,
And
Grow up. Everybody, that's a
well,
message.
yeah, I mean
Grow
that's the
up.
thing. I mean, you hear about the Illuminati, and
Mhm.
like you said, it's like, oh, that's the devil, and oh, what's the sign, the 666. But it's like, understand the origins of it. I did a whole study on my own of the Rosicrucians
Mhm.
and how they
Yeah,
came to be, and
yeah.
the just it's the knowledge that they took, where they took it from, and like you said, they extracted the spiritual part of it to just
Mhm.
to kind of bring it down to for whatever, by any means, whatever they needed to do with that
Yep.
knowledge, which
Mhm.
they've been doing. And then, like you said,
Yep.
they do this whole propaganda campaign of like, oh, it's evil, so you don't want to touch it because the Bible said that this is, or whatever it is. So make
Yep.
sure that we, who are the real the inheritors, or the descendants of it, we don't even want to be a part of it. We don't want to touch it. You know,
That's why that
it's
eye is
great
disconnected from
marketing.
that pyramid.
Yeah,
That's why that eye is
absolutely.
disconnected. If you go,
You
I
pull the
actually
funeral right
saw
on the
that
dollar.
pyramid on the dollar. I actually saw, what that pyramid is? It's in Sudan. It's in Merowe. It's in Merowe.
Wow.
I got.
Mm.
I'll show you in the new Out of Darkness. The new Heavy is the Crown that's coming out. You actually see it,
We can't
but
wait. Can't wait to
that
see that.
symbolized
Yeah,
because
that.
the eye is disconnected because they disconnected you from your history and culture. So that's the whole thing. They're putting it right in front of your
And they
face.
know, that they did it, and it's like, I just
They
these are
laughing
the
at
points
you.
that's triggering. That, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very triggering, because it's like a whole joke, like, oh, they're gonna put it on the dollar, and you're gonna use this as, going back and forth, and not even recognizing what the symbols are. One of the things, and it said in the
Hmm.
film, was that, our mind, we think in symbols. That's why the hieroglyphics, that's why everything was a symbol. That's how we understand everything. So symbols mean
Yeah.
so much. You can, a 1,000-word essay can be in one symbol. It's all,
Yep.
everything that you connect to it. So, but if you don't
Yep.
know, you you
Yep.
you really you have no idea what's going on, and it's right in front of your face.
And they'll use your
Absolutely.
strengths
Oh my
against you.
goodness. Yeah, I was.
They'll use your own spirituality against you, right? Because our ancestors was very smart. The Medu Neter, the language that we created, the
Oh
Medu
yeah,
Neter, which as of hieroglyphs, it's all symbolism. It's all based on
Net-
nature. It's all based on our connection to nature. See, the
absolutely.
European is disconnected from nature. he got trapped up here in the ice age, and depigmented himself and got disconnected from nature, and then came back down to the mothers and fathers, his own mothers and fathers, and saw them and saw that their skin was black, and they had all this rich culture, and they have all this agriculture and all of this science and stuff. Oh, we need to go and conquer these people, right? So then they take, after 4,000 years of them doing that, they take your greatest strengths and they turn it into your weaknesses. They take your spirituality and they use that as an enslavement tool, right? So again, we got to wake up. We got to be grown up.
The saddest part is that we are the people that are spiritually connected to nature, but we've been so disconnected. I mean, I just even think of like there's the hashtag Black girls do hike, or black people do these things, and it's like this is so much a part of us, but we've been so disconnected that we don't do those things anymore. So
you got to get back to the divine feminine.
Definitely. I hear you talking, because I'm like, that is one of the main things that we need to do. There is just the respect and the love and the power that comes from that. We have no idea. We don't even recognize how powerful that is, because we don't know how to tap into that level.
It's the most powerful force on the planet. It's the most powerful force on the planet.
I always say this. I say, know thyself.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Know thyself is the most powerful one. Kind of going back, because we were talking, but there was something in the film that said, just in talking about how Africa has been in the Americas for way before there was even a Christopher Columbus, but it talked about the 3 waves. There were currents in the ocean from Africa to like the Gulf of Mexico. And the Sudanese people, they had so much knowledge. They knew how to basically ride the wave. Like they would know when that current was coming, how it was coming, what time of day, and they would get on their boats and ride the wave to the Americas.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like,
it's actually not that far of a distance. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima talks about that, and They Came Before Columbus. There's 3 belts. There's 2 on the western tip, and there's 1 on the southern tip. I forgot what the name of what the currents are. I haven't studied it in a while, but you could literally just get on a boat and get in that current, and you wouldn't even have to do anything. The river would actually take you to America and drop you off in America, right? And our ancient ancestors in ancient Kemet, they actually built boats out of reed papyrus. So they knew how to make boats way 6,000 years ago. So there's probably waves of Africans that have been coming since the ancient times to America, right? So you can make that argument that we are the indigenous Americans. You can make that argument.
We are the indigenous. So what, and that turns the whole Native American, no, they were here first, that argument, it's kind of like, it turns it on its head, because we've been doing this we've been riding the wave for so long. But who knows that, Does that something
they reclassified you as Negro, Black, and colored. They reclassified you. They reclassified all those original Black Native Americans. Like the Europeans describe the original Americans as copper colored, just like the ancient Egyptians. If you look at the ancient Egyptians, they're always like this red kind of copper color. But the original depictions of the original Americans were very dark people, right? So then they go in and reclassify you as Negro. Right, so that's what they did. They took away. They denationalized us. They took our land. They came over here, conquered us, denationalized us, took away our land, took away our history and culture, and superimposed something that they made up. They social engineered us into something that they created for us as some culturally deficient person that they made up as to justify their domination of us. But we are the original people.
And like you said in the film, we survived that. We survived all of it. We survived all of that.
Yeah,
we are resilient,
and they're not going to be on the planet for too much longer.
So Michael, oh boy,
and they know it too.
what would you say? What would you say to people? I mean, just just for the fact that you gave so much, I mean, just deep substance in
Hmm.
regards to our history. Um, for people who are just coming out of the dark,
Hmm.
how are they going to get by on it every day? How do you really give them that advice to keep your head up and find the sunshine or find the peace or whatever it is you need? Because right now I do believe that there's a certain level of trauma
Hmm.
that we see on a daily basis.
Hmm.
Just looking at our history,
Hmm.
I do believe y'all can see me in tears just seeing some of the horrific pictures and
Yeah.
the constant terrorism
Yeah.
from the past to the present.
Yeah.
How can you be somebody who is aware right now,
Hmm.
and still be in a good space within yourself?
Well, first of all,
What kind of advice would you give
we need therapy.
a black
We
person?
need therapy. We need therapy and we need
Mm-hmm.
healing. That's the number one thing. See, all of the trauma that we're experiencing has never stopped since enslavement. It has never stopped. We're just constantly being
Right.
re-traumatized. And we actually are traumatizing our own children. We are introducing them to trauma and putting them into traumatic situations. So we're actually continuing the trauma. It's almost like it's on cruise control, right? So, and because that
Tell
trauma
me
has
about it.
never been
Mhm.
resolved, right? It has never been resolved. So we need
Right.
therapy as people, right? So that's the first thing I would say. I feel like every so-called black person needs therapy, right? I took my son in therapy,
Yep.
my daughter
Like, so go
therapy.
with that.
You know what I mean? So that, and then the second thing I would say is just get back to your history and culture. Learn about what you do. When I started to get into
Mhm.
African culture, it was very spiritually uplifting for me because I couldn't make sense of the world
Mm,
prior to learning about African history and culture. And then I started to figure out what had happened to us, who we were and what we lost. And the who we were part gave me inspiration.
Mhm.
That's the part that allows me to keep going because I'm like, yo, we it gives us something to work towards, right? It's a goal to get back to, right? So I don't think like, I'm sure I'm
Mhm.
traumatized, but I don't revel in it. I just keep positive attitude, and my job is to just keep going and keep working and
Mhm.
overthrow this thing and get rid of this white supremacy. And the Africans believed in the concept of the Wahemi Masu, which means the repetition of the birth. So this is not our
Mhm.
only
Okay.
life that we're gonna have. We're gonna come
Right.
back, right? Your ancestors come back. We
Right.
we we have been on this planet before. All of us, we've been on this planet before. So we might come back in a
Right.
1,000 years in the future, 5,000 years in the future, and it might not be no white supremacy. You know what I mean? But we are the ones that
Mhm.
have to work towards that, right? So we have to build. The name of my company is called Building Seven, right? We're constantly building. So we need to build nationhood. We need to build families. We need to build strong communities, and we need to heal ourselves. And that's why I see the women's job is to come in because you guys are the healers. The women are the healers, right? You guys are the nurturers. So that's why I
Mhm.
said you guys got to get back to the throw
Yep.
away the feminism, get back to the divine
Mhm.
feminine principle and access that because that's the most
Right.
powerful force on the planet. And you got, we need some healing. The brothers is at war. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Y'all can come in and
Absolutely.
heal
yes.
us, So that's what we need. We need you.
Yes. Y'all heard that? Y'all heard that?
Hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, y'all heard that.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. And we have you here to help us spread that message
Good,
and to give that
Mhm.
word
good, good, good.
because it is heavy, it is necessary. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
One
thank
one
Thank you
you,
for
thank
question,
having
you.
me.
what other projects I know